the conversation has changed quite a bit. EU leaders are now coming towards the way we are thinking in terms of how to address structural racism and tackling the root causes of racism in Europe today. And there's a lot more in the discourse in terms of looking at the causes of racism, including historical injustices. So when we're looking at slavery, colonialism, and their role in the injustice that racialized communities in Europe are facing today. So overall, we're seeing a lot of positive developments at the EU level, but I believe there is more still to be done.
Do you think the EU have identified the same root causes that you would identify?
I think that they're slowly getting there. I mean, we still see some major issues in terms of the EU's approach, and we need the EU to still move quite a bit in terms of reaching where European civil society and racialized communities are in terms of tackling structural and institutional racism.
How so? Can you
If
give
you
me some
look at
examples?
Yes, if you look at, for example, we have an EU commissioner for our way of life, for example, and clearly, Europe and the European institutions still haven't accepted that, European values and European exceptionalism caused the destruction in our homelands has led us here. We are here because you were there. So automatically, we need to address kind of areas of concern like that. Also, we need to look at how EU policies in other areas outside of racial justice, in climate, with COVID, with migration, how they exaggerate and sometimes increase racism in Europe. So we need to see that holistic approach, which is still not there at the moment. And you can see that, in the Recovery Fund, for example, racialized people have borne the brunt of COVID and have actually suffered in terms of the economic situation, the health situation, their the social situation, the employment situation, but yet they are completely omitted from the narrative at the EU level in terms of the COVID recovery, including from the COVID Recovery Fund.
What do you think then, practically, in terms of policy or education, what is it that needs to change, which you think
So,
would then see a real difference in terms of people's attitudes?
So I think we in our report from that we launched last week, we outlined three particular areas where the EU can change. So the first one is to have to have a better institutional framework in tackling structural racism. To move away from individual manifestations of hate, so hate crime and hate speech, and actually trying to tackle the root causes of racism. The second is political support. We need to have more political support. We can't just settle for the EU anti-racism action plan and the EU anti-racism summit once a year. We need to see everyday support from the European Union and the European leadership. And unfortunately, we're still not seeing that. I remember Commissioner Shinas, for example, when we had the Black Lives Matter, he was actually rebuked by the president because he was trying to deny the existence of racism in Europe, saying that, it's largely an American problem. And then finally, we would also recommend in our report is a new relationship with civil society. We see that racialized communities and anti-racist human rights defenders are under attack in Europe. If you see what's happening in France around Muslim activists, you see in Portugal, for example, now there's one of our steering group members, Mohamedou Ba, who's a very famous racialized person, activist, who's actually coming under threat from the far right. We need to see the EU speak out clearly and in support of these human rights defenders, which the EU sometimes is not doing because sometimes the EU is taking political calculations, and those political calculations are determining who the EU supports. So what I want to see and what my organization wants to see is more consistency from the EU and defending all human rights defenders and all anti-racist human rights defenders.